Again, how do you like the emoji? One of the universal questions of life is this, and you've heard it before, you have probably asked it, how can I be happy? Not a new question, right? In fact, King Solomon of Israel was asking it 3,000 years ago, and this is what he says in Ecclesiastes 6:6. He said, though a man lives 1,000 years twice over, but doesn't find contentment, well, what's the use? If you live to be 2,000 years old and you don't find some level of commitment or contentment or inner peace, then really, what's the use? So Solomon began a lifelong search for lasting happiness and true satisfaction. And I'm using the adjectives lasting and true because anybody can find happiness for an hour. Anybody can have fun for a day. He's searching for the kind of happiness or contentment that's going to get you through the tough times, the difficult situations. So in 2:1 of Ecclesiastes, he said this. It's an experiment we all would like to have been in on. I decided to enjoy myself and find out what happiness is. Now Solomon was uniquely qualified to make this search for happiness because God had given him wisdom, although that did not prevent him from making stupid and foolish decisions. And God had given him wealth. So this was a guy who had the brains and the bucks to search for the source of happiness. And he records his observation in a strange sounding book by the name of Ecclesiastes. Isn't that kind of a strange looking word? Ecclesiastes. What is he talking about? It's from the Greek Old Testament, ecclesia, and in the New Testament it's translated church. It means a gathering of people whom I am teaching. So Ecclesiastes is the people gathering as Solomon teaches them. And he searched for lasting happiness in 5 areas: education, pleasure, achievement, wealth, and success. And he said, lasting happiness is not found in any of these areas. Nothing wrong with them. They are all amoral. That is, they're neither moral nor immoral. They're amoral. They have no morality attached to it. It's what you decide to do with the education, the pleasure, the achievement, the wealth, and the success that determines whether it's good or bad. But in and of itself, not going to find lasting happiness in these areas. So the first area he searched was education. He talked about education and happiness. And this is what he said. I said to myself, do you ever talk to yourself? Of course you do. We all talk to ourselves. I said to myself, look, I am better educated than any of the kings before me in Jerusalem. I have greater wisdom and knowledge. But now I realize that even this was like chasing the wind. Have you ever tried to chase after wind? For the more my wisdom, the more my grief. To increase knowledge only increases distress. Take a look at that last phrase. To increase knowledge only increases distress. It is true, because the more we know, the more we see what is wrong with the world and with our personal lives. And certainly, we need to know the things that human wisdom can give us so that we can see the contrast between that and the wisdom of God But education in and of itself does not bring ultimate happiness and satisfaction. It just increases your grief as your knowledge goes up. Then he tried pleasure. He said, you know what, I'm going to try finding happiness in pleasure. And this was a guy who did not hold back, I promise. This guy did not hold back. I said to myself, talking to himself again, come now, let's give pleasure a try. Let's look for the good things in life. I want the good things. But I found that this too was meaningless. For example, laughter is silliness. Now, listen, he's not down on laughter. He's not saying that you ought to become a stoic person. There is a deeper meaning here, and he is saying that laughter, that humor, sometimes is a mask that people use to cover up the real problem. Sometimes people laugh, oh yeah, ha 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 ha. And they're masking the problem. That's why sometimes laughter is silly. I decided to cheer myself with wine. The oldest mood-enhancing drug in the world. I went to cocktail parties. Oh man, he was with the elite of Jerusalem, and they were drinking. And he said, you know, it's an ironic thing. I found some of the unhappiest people at happy hour. But I was drinking and having my wine. I embraced foolishness. I even did dumb stuff. I acquired a harem. He had 700 wives, 300 mistresses. He took it to the extreme. And he said, folks, multiple partners is not where it is at. Because people think that the enjoyment goes up as the partners go up in number. He said, no. The emptiness goes up as the numbers go up, because I had a different woman for every night for 2.5 years. 1,000 divided by 365, whatever that is. Then he said, anything I wanted, I would take. You know why he could do that? Because he's the king. That's right. I denied myself no pleasure. He even did stuff that you and I from the New Testament know is wrong. But he did it anyway, with wisdom guiding him at all times. So here's the bottom line. Pleasure by itself promises more than it can deliver. It accomplishes nothing and leaves you bored. It's true. In fact, pleasure alone produces a hypocrite. You know why? Because you have to start pretending that you're having fun. Everybody expects you to be having fun because they're living the life of pleasure. It's like the old saying, tell me, are we having fun yet? That's pleasure. That's how he experimented with it. Then he tried achievement. You know what? I'm going to try achievements and see if happiness can be found in just building stuff and having your name up on above the doors. And so it says in Ecclesiastes 2:4, I undertook great projects, all kinds of projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. He had accomplished all of these building projects. He had built reservoirs to irrigate. He was into irrigation, irrigating his crops. So I turned in despair from hard work Watch this. It was not the answer to my search for satisfaction in this life. Whoa! So even if you and I, and some of you may have, achieved a lot of things, he said there was no lasting happiness to be found in achievement itself. And this is a guy who built buildings, built houses, built reservoirs, irrigating crops and trees. Yet he said, it was not the answer to my search for satisfaction in this life. In the 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson launched what would be called the Great Society, and he had two lofty goals. Number one, the elimination of poverty. And number two, the elimination of racial injustice. He introduced 87 bills into Congress, 87, and astounding 84 passed and were signed, 96%. The most successful legislative president in the history of the United States. Nobody even comes close to Johnson. He got everything he wanted. So was he happy? He was sad, and he was depressed. You say, why? Well, you can read the biographer, what they had to say about him, authorized and unauthorized, but this is what he said. And his prediction would turn out to be true. He said, the reason why I'm not happy, the reason why I'm not satisfied, the reason why I'm not depressed is because I am not going to be remembered for the Great Society and the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act. You know what history is going to remember me for? One thing, the Vietnam War. And his prediction turned out to be true. And he was our brother in Christ. 3 presidents were members of the church, if we are counting Christians as adults, believers, immersed in water for the forgiveness of sins. Would that be pretty good for you? Johnson was baptized in 1923 in South Central Texas during a gospel meeting when he was a young person. Ronald Reagan was baptized in 1924 in Dixon, Illinois. And James Garfield, he was the only guy to become president who had previously been a preacher. But he was lived in Ohio, knew the governor of Ohio. The governor of Ohio said, you need to let me put you in the army. This is during the Civil War, and I will fast track you up to general, because after this war is over, for the next 25 years, military people are going to run this country. Ulysses Grant. So he got fast tracked to a major general. And then afterwards, he was pretty famous and became president. However, he was assassinated after just 4 months in office because somebody had a real beef with him. So I guess being a Christian doesn't prevent you from getting assassinated, apparently. So, achievement doesn't always equal success. Then he tried money. Money. How about money? Money and happiness. He said, I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household, so their people were born. I also owned great herds and flocks, more than any of the kings who lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. He was one of the wealthiest people in history, adjusted for inflation. He had everything that he could possibly want, yet he didn't find happiness there. It took him 7 years to build God's temple. Now get this, 7 years building God's glorious temple known as Solomon's Temple. 14 years to build his own house. 7 years for the temple, 14 years for his own house. And in 1 Kings 4, to feed his household for one day required the slaughter of 20 head of cattle and 100 head of sheep. So assuming they slaughtered 6 days a week, for 1 week to sustain his household required 120 slaughtered cattle and 600 head of sheep. I'm not that much into sheep food. Just picking something up on McDonald's on the way home. Money didn't bring him the happiness that he was searching for. Then he tried success. Success. Time's going to be a huge success. Ecclesiastes 2:9. I became greater than all who had lived in Jerusalem before me. Does this sound like a reoccurring phrase to you? I'm greater than those before me. Okay. We get it. Then when I surveyed all my hands had done and what I had achieved, everything was meaningless. And he was the undisputed, wisest leader of the most influential nation of the day. So why is Ecclesiastes in the Bible? God is teaching us that there are some dead ends that we can avoid. Save your time, save your money. Lasting happiness and true satisfaction is not found in these things. Now we read it and we agree with it, but you know what the problem is with human nature? Is we always overestimate the things we haven't personally experienced. So after all of that, education, pleasure, achievement, wealth, success, he said in chapter 2, verse 17, so I hated life. All of that. And he says, I hate life. Solomon was fed up and frustrated. So I came up with a formula. I'm going to give you my formula. Money plus power plus prestige does not always equal happiness. You know, there are celebrities, and there are some incredible celebrities. I mean, they are good looking. They are talented. They are wealthy. They are adored by millions of people throughout the world. You would think every celebrity would be so amazingly happy. Well, I have a short list of those who aren't. John Hamm. Some of you know John Hamm. Clinical depression. Ashley Judd contemplated suicide by her own admission. Several times she's wanted to kill herself. Heath Ledger, drug overdose. David Arquette, rehab. Catherine Zeta-Jones, depression. Winona Ryder, alcoholism. Andre Waters, NFL superstar, took his own life. Amanda Beard, Olympic gold medalist, at least one gold medal, depression. I mean, I figured if I won a gold medal at the Olympics, I'd be happy all the time. Especially when, you know, Cheerios calls and would like a contract with you. Cheerios or whoever, who's the people they put on the front of the box? Wheaties. Yeah, they still put people on the front of the box. I don't eat healthy, so I don't. I'm just messing with you. I don't know Wheaties are exactly what you need, but. So Solomon tried finding happiness in the 5 things that we spend most of our lives trying to achieve. Education, pleasure, achievement, wealth, and success. And he said that it wasn't there. Not that there was anything wrong with those things, but lasting happiness was not found in those things in and of themselves. So, he draws what is called the grand conclusion. I call it the grand conclusion. It is actually the 8th of 8 conclusions. He has 8 conclusions through the 12 chapters of the book, and the last conclusion, the grand conclusion, he says, here's what I think you ought to do. Fear God and keep His commandments. So I figured you knew that, so we don't need to talk about it a whole lot. But I would like to talk about happiness by going to the most famous sermon ever presented in the history of the world, called the Sermon on the Mount. And do you know how he begins the most famous sermon in history? By saying, I would like to give you 8 steps on how you can be happy. You know what they're called? The Beatitudes. You know what I call them? The Happy-tudes. Because that's what beatitude means. Now, granted, some of them are a little bit tough to interpret. You have to have some spiritual discernment. Some of them are a little tough. And so I've done my best to discover the principle and simplify it. But let's just talk about 8 steps that we can take if we want lasting happiness and some level of true satisfaction and contentment in our lives. So you're ready for step 1? Is you have to get to know God. It's true. This is Matthew 5:3. God makes happy those who know they need Him. Okay, what does that mean? The first step toward lasting happiness is recognizing where your real need is. See, the problem is a lot of people don't realize where their real need is. You do. That's why you're here. And we want as many people as possible to know that their real need is with God. There was a fellow who lived long ago by the name of Blaise Pascal. Died around 1662. He was a mathematician. There it is on the screen, okay? 1662. He was a mathematician, and he was a pioneer in the field of what would become calculating machines. And he is generally given credit for the statement that we sometimes make, every person has a God-shaped vacuum that only God can fill. You heard that? Although Pascal never used the phrase God-shaped vacuum. But as the story was told and retold, it eventually became a God-shaped vacuum. But this is what he actually said. Every human being has an infinite abyss that can only be filled by an infinite God. And he was a smart guy. I mean, he's already into calculating machines in 1662. That's pretty early. So, there are no replacements or plastic substitutes for God. Then number 2, second thing, is that we have to trust God when life is disappointing, which is going to be a significant part of the time. We have to trust God when life is disappointing. So this is Matthew 5:4. It says, happy are those who mourn. God will comfort them. Life is a combination of pleasure and pain. And if you have to be problem-free in order to be happy, then you're probably never going to be happy.
Amen.
If you are dependent on circumstances to make you happy, then you're going to be miserable most of your life. We have to somehow learn to be happy in spite of the problem, and a part of that comes from knowing God and knowing our need is God, and then trusting God when life isn't what we're expecting it to be. And then the third thing, is expect God to meet my basic. Get it down lower, take your expectations down. I know you're thinking brand new paid car, brand new house, all paid for. I didn't say that. It said basic physical and spiritual needs. Okay? Now, this is what it says in the Phillips translation up there. Happy are those who claim nothing, for the world belongs to them. This is what is called a paradox. A paradox is a statement that when you read it on the surface, literally, it can't be true. How could you claim nothing and own the world? It's kind of like when Jesus said, if any of you wants to be first, you have to be last. How can you be last and be first? See, it's a paradox. And in order to understand a paradox, you have to go below the surface and you have to spiritually discern the principle that is being presented. Here's what I believe Jesus is saying. The world does not belong to those who are frantically trying to grab all that they can get. From God's perspective, the world belongs to those who understand that this is not their final destination, and that your life is to be preparation for the next life. When you understand that you are here to prepare for the next life, you own the world. You own the world. Because you understand its real purpose. Step 4. You ready for step 4? Follow God's instructions. Follow God's instructions. Well, that's simple enough to comprehend. Doing it may be a little tough. This is Matthew 5:6. It says, happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. God will satisfy them fully. So if you do what God tells you to do, and the clear stuff, you'll be satisfied fully. Now, it doesn't say you'll be wealthy, powerful. Although if you get that, just consider it a blessing on the side. 1 Timothy 6:17 says, God richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Everything. He's given us everything. Every principle, every rule, every command in the Bible is for your benefit. And the closer you get to following these principles, the more deeply satisfied your life is going to be in spite of your circumstances. The more you ignore these principles, the more discouraging and stressful and tense your life is going to be. So follow God's instructions. Step 5. Beatitude number 5. I like to think of them as steps. Cultivate a forgiving heart. Cultivate. Cultivate. Like a farmer would cultivate crops. The crop comes up, they have to fertilize it, put some insecticide on it. You have to cultivate it. You have to take care of it. You have to manage it. And so it says, Matthew 5:7, happy are the kind and merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. Two of the great destroyers of happiness are resentment and bitterness. And there's going to be people who are going to hurt you, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. What matters is your response. Holding a grudge robs you of your joy and prevents you from finding lasting happiness or inner peace. And usually the way it works when you're holding a grudge is it hurts you more than it hurts the person you're upset with, because they may not even know how you feel. So we have to cultivate a forgiving heart. You have to be willing to release people and let situations go because they're beyond your control. Step 6 is maintain a clear conscience. And I say maintain. I think it's something that we have to do on a daily basis. Maintain a clear conscience. You have to maintain your car. You do have to change the oil now and then. You have to maintain it. It says in Matthew 5:8, happy are those whose hearts are pure, for they shall see God. See, guilt destroys happiness. Things in the past. Things that we feel bad about that we did to people. Things we were feeling bad about that people did to us. But notice that happiness is an inside job that starts with the heart. The happiest people are the people who are living with integrity. That is, they are the same on the outside as they are on the inside. And this is going right along with Solomon, with what Solomon said. Solomon said, happiness, it doesn't come from the outside in. It's not education, pleasure, achievement, wealth, success in. It's the heart out. It's the heart out. Happiness is an inside job. Then step 7 is build healthy relationships. Healthy relationships. Of course, you can't control the other person, but you can do the best that you can do. This is Matthew 5:9, and it says, "Happy are those who strive for peace, for they shall be called sons of God." Conflict destroys happiness. A person can climb the ladder of success to the top of their career, but if you lose your family and your friends along the way, what good was it? Now, if you can climb the ladder of success to the top of your career and maintain your family, your marriage, and your friends, now you're on to something. Now you've got something going that's good. But if relationships are bad, then life is bad no matter how much you have. And then step 8. Step 8 is live with an eternal perspective. This is real important for happiness, contentment, inner peace. We don't just see things in the here and now. We have an eternal perspective. So let's read Matthew 5, verse 10. It says, "Happy are those who are persecuted because they are good." It doesn't say, "Happy are those who are persecuted because they're dumb and obnoxious." Doesn't say that. Because they are good. "For the kingdom of heaven is theirs. When you are reviled and persecuted and lied about because you are my followers, wonderful! Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a tremendous reward awaits you up in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted too. Doing the right thing, even when it's clearly defined, is not always easy, but you're going to have eternity to enjoy the rewards. And so it's all a matter of perspective and where I ultimately want to be rewarded. But it's not easy to do the right thing, always. So I'm going to tell you the story of Gordon Klingenschmidt. Gordon Klingenschmidt. Don't ask me to spell it. In 2006, Gordon was serving as a Navy chaplain, a chaplain in the Navy. The Secretary of the Navy issued a new prayer policy that said, chaplains cannot pray in Jesus' name outside of Sunday chapel or they face misdemeanor court-martial. Gordon Klingenschmidt knew that this wasn't in harmony with our Constitution. So he was at a White House press meeting dressed in full uniform, and he prayed in Jesus' name. So I don't think they used the word arrest. I'll just use the word arrest for a lack of the military term. But he was brought to court. He was found guilty. He was court-martialed. And because it was a misdemeanor court-martial, he was honorably discharged, but he lost his 16-year career and his pension and the honor of serving as a chaplain. He was very sad. He took it public, and 520 newspapers reported on it. 300,000 faithful Americans signed petitions. 35 pro-family groups were involved. And 75 lawmakers who petitioned the president, President Bush, to reverse the Navy's policy targeting Christians. Congress vindicated him and removed the bad policy, and he was reinstated with everything that he had honorably worked for. Not always easy to stand up. I mean, this is, however you feel about it, this is a person who was being persecuted, being limited because of his faith in Christ. It's not always easy. according to secular history, and some of it pretty good history, some of it a little bit on shaky ground, of the 12 apostles, the 12 original, we're not including Paul, who came along later, or Matthias, who replaced Judas. We talk about the original 12. Only one died a natural death, and that was John. The other 11 died either by being tortured or crucified. You know what? I wish we could call those 11 guys up here and just ask them. They don't have to speak for long. And just ask them, was it worth it? I wonder what they would tell us. I think I know what they would tell us. You think of John the Baptist. Now there was a guy. Introduced Jesus to the world. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. John the Baptist. Jesus is really going to take care of that guy. He gets, John the Baptist, he's beheaded. The head is put on a platter. And this is the guy who introduced Jesus Christ to the world. Couldn't God have done something to take care of him a little better than that? That's how I'm thinking as an American. You can be a Christian and still be miserable as ever if you buy into the wrong perspective that lasting happiness is found only in education, pleasure, achievement, wealth, and success. Because Solomon tried it all to a degree that we'll never be able to do it. Because he was the king, he'd get away with anything, had all the money. He said, it's not there, folks. Happiness is not the result of circumstances. It is a choice that begins when you say, I'm going to start by getting God at the center of my life, and I am going to keep focused on these 8 principles of Jesus. And if you do that, continue to do that, then you're going to continue to have some level of happiness and contentment. I think you are a lot happier and content than you even realize. We need to bring in some really sad, depressed people one Sunday morning. Just so you can have, no, I'm serious. I know where we could find them. We could find some people who'd like to invite you over to church. We could get the real sad ones. And then I think you would be able to see the contrast in your own life. That you have happiness and contentment more than you think you do, because you have not only your daily focus, but you have an eternal focus. You have a focus out here. It's a beautiful thing, because that's what's going to get you through the difficult times. I would like to close with a prayer, and the prayer is at the end of your outline. And I thought we could stand while I read it. We can count it as a prayer, and then Stephen is going to come up and we'll have our invitation hymn. Father, I want you to be at the center of my life. I don't understand it all, but today and every day I want to say yes to you. Help me to trust you when life is disappointing. Help me to follow your clear instructions. Help me to cultivate a forgiving heart and maintain a clear conscience. Please forgive me for the things I know I've done wrong. Thank you for dying on the cross for me. Help me to build healthy relationships and live with an eternal perspective and do the right thing, not because it's easy, but because I know I'll be rewarded in eternity. In Jesus' name, amen. If you have a need, let us know as we sing.